Hello everyone, and welcome back to another review. This time we'll be taking a look at Five Nights at Fred.
Connection terminated. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Elizabeth.
Not too sure where that came from, but again, hello everyone, and welcome back to another video. And today we are finally tackling Outbreak. Released on February 25th, 2021 during Cold War Season 2, and supported all the way through the game's life cycle, Outbreak is the first truly open-world zombies experience in COD history. The basis of Outbreak is you travel to different regions across the Ural Mountains Outbreak Zone and complete objectives to help Requiem in Operation Threshold, their efforts to catch up to Omega. With that, let's hop in our sedan.
Ja! Feed, mein Drachen! Feed!
And warp straight into this. So before we hop into exactly what I love about Outbreak, which is just about everything, we have to discuss what sets this mode apart from the classic survival-based experience we all know and love. Starting off with the core gameplay aspects. Outbreak takes place in the several Fireteam, Dirty Bomb, and Combined Arms maps, including Ruka, Alpine, Golova, Sanatorium, this time set after hours as opposed to its multiplayer counterpart, Duga, Zoo, Collateral, and Armada. On these large maps, the player is dropped in and immediately given a main objective that they must tackle in order to progress. However, the player is allowed to go and do whatever they want. They can loot chests and kill zombies and then tackle the main objective, or they could just bull rush straight for it. There are 7 objectives total: defend, escort, retrieve, secure, transport, eliminate, and holdout. These range from defending a Dark Ether Specimen Analyzer, DASA for short, in order to help get a better understanding of the undead, or helping Containment destroy a Dark Ether power node by setting charges on a crystal and taking the fight to the Dark Ether itself. While these main objectives must be completed, across the Outbreak Zone, there are at a max of 4 side objectives per region, ranging from the Lost Patrol objective, where you have to avenge a fallen strike team, to an Omega helicopter that you have the option of taking out for bonus salvage and score streaks. Due to the nature of this mode, point distribution is slightly different. Each objective rewards the players with points dependent on the region they find themselves in, i.e. if you're in Region 1, you receive 1,000 bonus points, and it keeps going on and on. Upon finishing your main objective, you are presented with a beacon that when activated gives you everything you need in one spot: Wonder Fizz, Pack-a-Punch, Manny the Mannequin, and the crafting table. When using the beacon, there are 2 options: to move forward to the next region and increase the difficulty, or exfil on your current region. And with these changes discussed, we can jump into what I love about Outbreak. Starting off the good with how open this game mode is. Thankfully, because the game mode uses the Fireteam Dirty Bomb maps, there is tons of room to explore without triggering zombies. While there is zombies strewn about the entire region, there's a certain range you must enter before they become aggroed on you. There are also several ways to move around in the Outbreak zones, including hopping in the several vehicles around the map, using the jump pads from Funny Base Z, or the tears on the edges of the map. Upon entering a tear, you are thrust through the Dark Ether and sent sky high at a different location, which can be incredibly helpful for traversing the zone. Next is just how different every match can be. You can choose to move through the OZ at any pace you desire, whether that means you get in, bum rush the objective, and move on as quickly as possible, or scour the region, find the side objectives, and get your weapons upgraded. And thankfully, the game supports both fantastically. While one is definitely more difficult than the others, they're both definitely possible if the player is up for it. Next, let's discuss the regions themselves. While yes, they are shared with Fireteam Dirty Bomb, they're so expansive, allowing for players to do really whatever they want. My personal favorite regions are Golova, Sanatorium, Collateral, and Armada. Each one feels distinct from the other. Golova takes place in a hillside Soviet town. There's tons of open fields and houses to loot through, to the church all the way at the top of the map. Sanatorium, set on the lakeside building from multiplayer, is set at night this time to really make it distinct from the other maps. And while some people say it's way too dark to see, I think this adds to the effects of the map. It being dark makes it feel just made for zombies. And the glow of the moonlight in Cold War's engine is just fantastic. Collateral is set in the deserts of Algeria, and this time is set during a sandstorm to make it different from its multiplayer counterpart. This map is so interesting due to it being a smaller map, which makes it easier to traverse and a more distinct locale. While the other regions are mostly copy-pastes of each other, all being set in the Ural Mountains, this map finally gets to break free and be its own thing. The rocky hills are my favorite because when combined with the grapple hook, yes, you heard me right, but we'll get to that in a bit, you can absolutely zoom across the region. And finally, Armada. Set in the North Atlantic Ocean across 3 ships fighting over a nuclear submarine, Armada takes zombies to the high seas, which isn't exactly new for the mode. Of course, see Voyage of Despair. But it does it in such a way that makes it interesting. You can ride the boats all around the map, and on Armada, only certain objective types are allowed due to the setting, which makes it really interesting in higher region runs. Now, with my favorite regions, there is obviously my favorite objectives. My favorite ones to play, and the ones that I think are the most distinct and fun, are Retrieve, Secure, Transport, Eliminate, and Holdout. Retrieve sees the strike team under Dr. Strauss heading to a mobile transport station and finding that the team before them has been slaughtered. It is then up to the team to go and find the nearby raw Ethereum samples, deliver them to the rocket in the time provided. What makes this so interesting is that zombie aggression is increased during this objective to keep the players on their toes, as well as the player with a sample on their back is slower but given an incredibly powerful Ethereum blast to protect themselves. This works amazingly, and while it can be bypassed with grapple hooks, it's always just a good way to keep the flow going. Next, Secure. Another Dr. Strauss objective. This time, we go to a terminal and call down 2 ECM rockets. These rockets act as soul boxes that the players must fill up while also defending them from being destroyed. Each rocket takes 16 zombies to charge, with each set of 4 counting as 25%. Upon filling the rockets up, a Dark Ether object, DAO for short, is created. This can be essence, score streaks, ammo mods, and more. I love this objective because the game likes to throw everything it's got at you to make you work to fill up the rockets. The final Strauss objective is Transport. Strauss points the team to a mobile harvester unit, which, go figure, is found dead by the time you get there. It is then up to you to take the truck to the sites to extract primordial Ethereum from the source. Upon reaching the objective areas, your truck is immediately hit by an EMP blast, and you must defend it till you absorb the Ethereum. Following that, you can move to the second site, and after securing that one, you can finally take them to the remote launch station and deposit the samples. What I love about this objective is not just being able to drive this big truck around, hitting everything in my path, but just how high octane it can get upon reaching the primordial site. Zombies just rush the truck, and it's up to you and your team, or if you like me and you just play solo, just yourself, to defend it at all costs. Finally, off of Strauss, we move on to Carver, with his objective, Eliminate. In this, we find a terminal we use to contact Requiem Control to use the Dimensional Disruptor to pull an Apex HVT into our reality. This ranges from an HVT Megaton, Mangler, Krosny Soldat, and with Season 5, the Mimic. These enemy types are stronger than their standard counterparts and can spawn enemies to defend themselves. This objective keeps the players on their toes and keeps them mobile, and can honestly be completed so fast if you are like me and have their paths memorized for every region. The final objective I really enjoy is Holdout. Upon entering a region, Carver will alert the team to a terraforming crystal. These crystals are slowly turning the zones we fight into a landscape similar to that of the Dark Ether. When getting closer to the crystal, the area will begin to slow the player down, and the Forsaken will speak to you. You interact with the crystal and plant charges. The crystal then begins to drag you into the Dark Ether as a sort of defense mechanism. Now, this is where I start to feel conflicted on this objective. You are then teleported to a closed area that is in the map, but this time set in the Dark Ether. And on higher regions, it can get really hectic. Megatons will spawn on top of fast zombies to keep the player moving. A lot of these areas are so tight that it requires a lot of finesse to traverse properly. With the main course out of the way, let's get into the side objectives. The launch ones were Lost Patrol, Feeding Time, Golden Chest, and the Ethereal Orb. Lost Patrol, as I mentioned in the changes section, finds you getting revenge for your fallen comrades by taking out a nearby group of enemies. This can be a Megaton with a group of Plague Hounds, a Krosny with a group of Hellhounds, or Manglers with Tempests. Upon getting higher in the region, the main enemies, that being the Megaton, Mangler, and Krosny, will be replaced by their HVT variant. And on the topic of enemies, I've already mentioned them, but I have to discuss the Krosny Soldat and the Tempest. The Krosny Soldat is similar to the Panzer Soldats of the past, but instead of a shock charge, he has a fire charge that upon landing will leave a pool of fire on the ground. This one is also equipped with a jetpack to make sure that he keeps on the players at all times. While not as strong as the previous incarnations, the Krosny can still kick ass if not playing carefully. The Tempest, on the other hand, is on the weaker side. This crystalline creature shoots bolts of pure electricity at the player, which can stop vehicles and deal damage. These bolts can be destroyed, but if the player dodges or ignores the Tempest for too long, they will teleport around the player, creating an interesting gameplay loop of trying to stay one step ahead of them. Now, back to side objectives. In feeding time, the players find a dragon relic lying around. After paying 500 essence, a dragon straight up from Dreisendrach pops out of the slot and sets a circle the player must sacrifice in. Thankfully, you don't have to do it one at a time, and as I mentioned in my Forsaken review, this can drop several different rewards based on how filled the dragon is. The final launch objective is the Golden Chest. Sent straight from the Dark Ether, this mysterious chest must be challenged to be opened. By interacting with it, you challenge the Dark Ether itself and must clear the area before you can access it. The chest will always give the best rewards and offers not only a full power, but salvage, gun, perks, ammo mods, score streaks, and more. The final side objective is the orb. While this is a side objective, it does not appear on the map like the others do. Instead, it only appears when the player gets close to it. This orb can be in several spots around each region, and when found can be shot by the players. Upon dealing enough damage to the orb, it will screech and fly away, leaving behind tons of essence to pick up. The players must then follow the orb to its next spots and repeat the process. Upon stopping at its final spot, it will explode like a piñata and drop tons of loot for the players to pick up and use. Now with that, we can move into post-launch objectives, starting with the Lost Signal. In this, players will find a radio around the Outbreak Zone and will not be marked on the minimap similar to the orb. When activating it, it summons a horde of zombies to the player's location that must be dealt with before continuing. Upon clearing the horde, the radio will play a tone. You must then find 3 smaller radios to send the signal back to the main radio. When all 3 smaller radios play the same tune, you can return to the main radio and activate it. Upon that, it will spit out not only a golden music tape that features instrumentals from all of our favorite zombie songs, but tons of essence. Side note, as of the November 3rd update, the legends themselves at Treyarch added all of the music tapes to the music player in the menu, making it super easy to listen to all of them. After that, one that might just be my favorite is Orda. Returning from Funny Base Z, this monstrosity will roam a small section of the region and become hostile when the players move close to him. He has a few attacks, including firing hellhounds at the player that explodes on impact, slamming down with his club arm, swiping with said arm, stomping, sending his flaming bees at the players just like in Funny Base, and spawning zombies to attack the player. If the player wanders too far away from Orda, he will begin to heal the damage taken. Upon defeating Orda, he will drop tons of loot, including perk cans, guns, weapons, ether tools, and more. Speaking of ether tools, the Fury Crystal objective. This objective sees an orange crystal in specific spots around the map. Upon destroying the initial crystal, duplicates of it will spawn and the players must destroy them all before time runs out. If they succeed, they are rewarded 1 ether tool that one person can use to increase the rarity of their weapon by 1. The final one is the Black Chest. This objective sees the players interacting with a mysterious voice inside of a dark chest. The voice pleads for our help, and upon interaction, 3 locks fly out of the chest. These locks must be destroyed, and when shot at will fly around in an attempt to protect themselves. After destroying all 3 locks, you may return to the chest and open it. The soul inside, named Piotr, will swear fealty and reward the player with different levels of armor and chalices, which upgrade the player's weapons based on if it's bronze, silver, or gold. An added bonus for completing this objective is that while on the region that the chest was open, if any player's health reaches 50 or lower, Piotr will come in and rescue them, stopping any zombies near the player and killing them so they can begin to regen. Anyways, I can't stop this feeling that I'm forgetting something. Man, what is it?
That's an Omega helicopter. You're cleared to pursue. Solid.
Ah, that's right, the Omega helicopter. This objective sees an Omega Hind stopped somewhere in the Outbreak Zone. Upon getting remotely close to it, the Hind will lift off. Weaver will then alert the team it is their decision to engage. If you can down the helicopter before it can leave the zone, it will drop a supply drop that has tons of salvage and score streaks. Okay, now that we passed the objectives, but before we get into Outbreak's main quest, yes, I mean quest, we need to dig into all the little things that Outbreak does that sets it apart. First, grapple hooks. Added during Cold War Season 5, but something I had been wanting in Outbreak since it came out in Season 2. These are tactical items that can be found during a match. You can hold up to 10 and each pickup is equal to 5 grapples. Thankfully, you can grapple onto just about anything you see, like so. However, this doesn't apply to Orda, sadly, but it makes traversing the zones so much easier. Following that, the Wonder Weapons. Outbreak features the Ray Gun, the Ray K-84, and the Die Shockwave in its 4 variants. I firmly believe that each Wonder Weapon has its place in the meta, with each finding its own use around the OZ. The OG Ray Gun best used for clearing crowds, the Ray K used to stun hordes, and the Die Shockwave used to deal damage en masse. A small thing, but as I mentioned in the Forsaken video, Outbreak is our first encounter with Ronald Reagan. Some go their whole lives without seeing him, some claim to have seen it who ain't, and some, like me, have footage of him. Upon finding him in the OZ and killing him, he drops a ray gun for anyone in the game to pick up and use. Outbreak also features fishing, an incredibly fun little feature added during Season 3 Reloaded that can reward players with salvage, wonder weapons, mimics, and more. Also in Outbreak, the Trial Machine returns, this time with some new challenges to accommodate the open world setting. And these challenges last for 5 minutes to give you more than enough time to complete them. The final thing to mention before going to the story and Easter eggs, should you want to skip regions to help your game go a tad bit faster, during the first 6 regions of the game, you can destroy the beacon as you are teleporting to skip 1 region ahead. So if you are on region 1, you jump to 3, 3 to 5, etc. Past region 6, it is impossible to break, unfortunately. And now we can jump into the story. In Outbreak, the Dark Ether goes open world. It expands to engulf the Ural Mountains region of the Soviet Union. And if you recall, at the end of Funny Base Z, Ravenov pointed out that Omega had expanded operations to the Urals. Upon spelling this to Maxis, who then gave it to Requiem, they prepared Operation Threshold. Their one chance to study the Dark Ether in the field. Containment, unnatural sciences, and energy and research all have a stake in this operation. As we see throughout the seasons, the OZ is the area with the single highest concentration of Ethereum. Grey uses her DASA stations to study the minds of the undead, and her rovers with the monkeys to see the effects of Ethereum on organic tissue. Strauss uses his objectives to study the Ethereum crystals in their natural state, looking to use them to further Requiem's research. And my personal favorite, Carver. His objectives from a narrative standpoint are the most interesting. Eliminate sees us fighting HVTs, and as we learn that the reason they look different is that the enemies themselves are designated commanders of the Forsaken's army, and as such have marked themselves properly. And while Carver believes in a hierarchy in the Dark Ether, every one of his colleagues doubt him. But he finds a very odd document while meeting with the director one day that proves his suspicions and makes him question who he's working for. Then, with Holdout, the terraforming crystals are created by Tempest planting a piece of themselves into the ground. As these crystals develop, they eventually mature and terraform the region to make it look similar and more habitable to the creatures of the Dark Ether. However, while we worked on catching up, Omega was already on to the next step of their plan. Following the loss of his eye in the jungle, Dr. Peck was immediately transferred by Kravchenko to the Ural Mountains under the watch of his right-hand man, Gorev. His mission? Study the Dark Ether and help construct something to stop their next threat, the One. What Peck created was his inversion warheads. After experimenting on Tempest and some help from the stranger, he showed off the warheads to Colonel Kravchenko, who then took it to the men upstairs, and soon after, Operatia Inversia was approved. We also begin to see some distrust brewing in Omega's ranks, as Valentina, Gorev, and Peck find Krosny's Soldat armor from the Dark Ether that had been retooled and repainted. They all agree to keep it between themselves. Through all of this, the strike team also maintained contact with the stranger, who would reveal himself as Kazimir Zykov, the tank engineer who was sent in at Project End Station to shut the cyclotron down. Zykov told the team of his struggles in the Dark Ether and just how bad it was going to get. A war was brewing, one that transcended East and West, and one that the world would not be ready for unless Requiem could find a way to rescue Zykov from the Dark Ether. And while he talked to us, he also established and maintained contact with Peck, and offered him the same message. Zykov was fighting to get out of the Dark Ether to try and save our world, and would help whichever side did it first. Gorev and Valentina took note of Peck's use of the Dark Ether PC, and Valentina assured Gorev it would make its way to the kernel. The final player I haven't mentioned, Samantha. Following her traumatic experience at Outpost 25, she was taken into Requiem custody and immediately put under hospital care. Each of the Requiem heads have their chance to interview Maxis and try to break through her rough exterior. This leads to her making a close friendship with Dr. Gray, who tries to see her as a person and not as an artifact of the Dark Ether. Weaver also gifts Maxis a puppy who she names Natso. This leads into Outbreak Main Quest number 1. Taking place on November 16th, 1984, Ravenov had told Maxis of the operation in the Ural Mountains and had plans to meet her in the OZ, but due to her being under lock and key at Requiem HQ, she uses Dr. Gray's code to reach the strike team in the OZ, in a minigame similar to the music side Easter egg, and direct them to an Omega Group comms device. This would ensure that they could not be listened to. Maxis directs the team to find a dead drop that Ravenov had left for her to gain a clue to his whereabouts. The team finds microfilm slides and uses them in a nearby projector and learns of Operatia Inversia. Upon teleporting to Ruka and entering the bunker at the missile silos, and lifting the lockdown, the strike team then meets up with Ravenov. He tells them that the missiles are meant to be used on the US and must be diverted. Maxis suggests the Pacific Ocean, and strike team is then tasked with finding 3 launch keys. The player is given full reign to run around the bunker to complete the mission, and I honestly wish this was a round-based area on its own. The first key can be obtained by finding an Ethereum canister in one of the silos and breaking crystals around the area to fill it up, taking it into another silo and using it to trick a Dark Ether jellyfish to suck you in and trade the canister for the key. The next can be obtained in what I can only describe as Mimic Hell. In the central command of the silos, there are tons of Mimic items, and my favorite part of this quest is to run into the room and set them all off at once. Once they are dealt with, you find that hallway C has been blocked off and a dead Omega soldier is left lying there. Upon reaching for his key, the HVT Mimic will make an appearance, and upon killing him, you can obtain the second key. In the final silo, you will hear a ghostly monkey, and you must use an Omega Essence trap with a banana strapped on top of it to lure the monkey out to gain the final key. During this, zombies, tempests, manglers, and megatons will spawn to try and thwart the player. Before an update, the zombies would super sprint in this area, and while I miss the intensity, I think the section still works really well. Finally, after getting all 3 keys, you can use them in the proper order, and thankfully, instead of trial and error, you can just look on the control panels to see the order in which the keys have to be turned. Just as you're about to celebrate your victory royale over Omega, a voice comes over the intercom that warns of obstructions in the hatches. Ravenov instructs the team to go above ground and see what's going on. Upon exiting the bunker, 2 portals are opened in the sky, and there are huge crystals blocking the hatches. The Tempest from the Inversion warheads form together to create Legion. This boss fight begins under the stress of the missile timer ticking in the background. Honestly, this is one of Cold War's best boss fights. The timer is by no means stressful, as the game gives you 9 minutes to fight Legion. The way you beat him is to shoot him in the chest to knock him over, and then these smaller orbs will come out and must be destroyed one at a time to break the crystals. Do that and the Easter egg will finish. The warheads are launched to the ocean, and Raptor 1 flies in to save the team, noting how Weaver is pretty pissed about us going behind his back, but he wouldn't leave us behind. This Easter egg is honestly fantastic and shows how an open world main quest could work. This ending has immediate ramifications for both Omega and Requiem. For Requiem, Strike Team is immediately almost hit with a court-martial, but the director steps in at the last second to save us. Gray gets a strong slap on the wrist and a huge warning from Weaver to not betray his trust again. As for Maxis, her walks with Natso are immediately withdrawn, and she has a blowout fight with Weaver. The next day, Weaver comes in with unfortunate new directions from the director. 2 men take Maxis away while she cries for Weaver's help, but he has to ignore her and comforts Natso. On the Omega side of things, Kravchenko goes ballistic. This is Omega's final straw. If they can't produce results, they'll be finished. Kravchenko asks Gorev what they should do with Peck, and Gorev notes that while he wishes to see Peck strung up in the gulag, he knows that Peck was not the traitor and is still their leading authority on Ethereum and could potentially have a lead on the entity. Gorev mentions the PC and how Peck talks with it, to which Kravchenko is surprised. Gorev tries to explain that he thought Valentina told him, and Kravchenko takes note of that. Valentina at this time is preparing to set her plan into motion, which would come into fruition following main quest number 2. Ravenov is outed as the mole and has a burn notice placed on him, making him an enemy of the state. But the actions in the silos at Ruka created chaos in the ranks of Omega, leading to 8 members wanting to jump ship to Requiem in hopes to save themselves. Ravenov approached Weaver with this information, and while skeptical after going behind his back, Weaver takes the information to the director. Taking place on the night of December 14th, 1984, Requiem enacts Operation Excision. Upon reaching Region 3, a red portal can be found on every region but Sanatorium, due to that being the location of the finale. Upon finding the portal and entering it, you will hear a static voice comm from Ravenov attempting to reach the team. You will then be spit out into the air and must fly into the red portals 3 times in order to retrieve the comms device. Upon finishing the region and interacting with the beacon, Ravenov will alert you that he has lost contact with the defectors near the Sanatorium. You are then transported there and can begin your search. You find their helicopter near the border of the left side of the map. Upon reaching it, you will be ambushed by the undead and must clear them out. After killing them all, a radio hanging out of the helicopter will become available to listen to. Dr. Yeager's voice will come over and tell the team that they have taken refuge on Monument Island. The only problem? The phase separates the 2 islands. Yeager directs the team to craft an Ethereum neutralizer. The team then splits to find Ethereum to power the device. After finding a red orb, players can guide it to the bridge where a retooled rover is waiting. The orb stops above the rover and Weaver wonders how to draw it in. The team then sets out to find something to draw it out, and finds the Mystery Box Bunny. After retrieving him and Mr. Peaks' note, you can bring him to the rover and the bunny's laughter draws in the orb, powering the machine. Spitting out a radio, Yeager informs them that they can use the rover to traverse the phase, and that the scientists are there waiting for them. Soon they will change the world. What begins following that is an escort step, which is much more fun as it acts similarly to the escort at the end of Tog der Toten. After following it to the monument, comms are regained and Weaver directs the team to reach the scientist. Upon reaching the top, the team is greeted by a grisly sight. The Omega defectors had been slaughtered. The Ethereum neutralizer blueprint had been burned and left near the corpses, and a message on the wall made it clear. No one walks away from Omega. Upon listening to the final radio, Yeager reveals that he was the traitor and jumped up instantly at the opportunity when the Colonel mentioned it to him. The recording ends with the same line, "Soon we will change the world," this time in a more sinister tone. The tone signaling the undead plays through the radio, and Weaver immediately calls Raptor 1 for evac. At the site, Strike Team clears the LZ, including a whole-ass Orda. Upon boarding Raptor 1, Weaver tells the team to come home, to which Kravchenko says not quite. An RPG hits the helicopter and it goes down. The team crawls out of the wreckage and is greeted by Kravchenko himself and a team of Omega goons. They drag Raptor 1's body out of the wreck, and Kravchenko alerts them to their new employment status. Weaver recognizes Kravchenko's voice instantly, and the cutscene ends, alluding to our next map that I already covered, Mauer der Toten. This is my favorite quest in-game. It keeps it simple, but is packed to the brim with story information, and the ending cutscene is just fantastic. And before we wrap up the good, I need to mention some final story bits talked about during Season 5. I've already discussed most of it in my Forsaken review, but what I didn't mention was the Dark Ether intel itself. We learn from Piotr, one of the lost souls in the Dark Ether, that there isn't much hope of escaping the Dark Ether. But we do discover that he finds a temporary way to leave, the Black Chest. Upon being freed, he latches onto us as thanks. But unfortunately, the reason his blessings doesn't go through with us is that the Forsaken takes hold of him and drags him back in. He also reveals that feeding the dragons in the Outbreak zones actually powers up the Forsaken, which is quite the revelation, seeing as we've been doing it for 4 seasons leading up to that. And also, Zykov admits to betraying us, but he does confirm that he doesn't care who brings him home first. But whoever does it will receive his help, basically setting up Forsaken. And with that, we can jump into the things I didn't like after the break. And with that, we can jump into what I don't like in Outbreak, starting with some of the objectives. I mentioned the ones I really enjoyed in the previous section, but there are some that just aren't too fun to play through. Namely, Dr. Gray's objectives. Defend, for example, is such a snooze fest. It's like 3 minutes of defending the DASA station where basically nothing happens. And Escort kinda feels the same way. The only true threat to the rover is Hellhounds and Tempests, because as long as you are near the rover, it moves and zombies cannot touch it. I think the Operation Excision version of the Escort is how it should work, where all players are required within a certain range of the rover in order to make it move. Next, Holdout. As I mentioned on high region games, Holdout can be really fun, but in the beginning few regions, Holdout can feel like it takes forever to complete. And on that note, the early game of Outbreak, which is where a lot of people's criticisms lie. It can feel like it just drags on because the game doesn't truly ramp up the difficulty until like regions 5 or 6, and when the difficulty hits the roof, the game just spams armored enemies and elites at you, forcing the players to drop whatever gun they started with in the OZ, and moving on to a shotgun because it's basically the only thing that works. I still love high region games of Outbreak, but the difficulty scaling is kinda off. As for the regions I didn't mention in the good, I don't necessarily hate them or feel like it's a bore going to them, but Alpine, Ruka, Duga, and Zoo are just kinda all the same to me. Alpine and Duga are standouts because it is just super fun to jump down at the top of the hill, or in Duga's case, the radar array, and glide to the bottom, but the others are just areas with tons of trees and nothing interesting going on. At least in Zoo's case, the animal exhibits actually do have the hound enemy types in them, which is pretty neat. The final real qualm I have with Outbreak is the stability. So many games of mine have crashed while teleporting between regions, playing during high region games, and more. It isn't as bad as, say, like Launch, where I couldn't even do the D Machina Easter egg on next gen because of these issues. But when you get a really good game going and you lose it to nothing but the game just not functioning properly, it's really demoralizing. And now we can talk about my nitpicks. First, secure on solo play. It still works like normal, but upon completing the first rocket on solo, the zombies will immediately begin to attack the second rocket. Now that's all fine and dandy, but the issue comes with the fact that there is considerable distance between the two rockets. Most times, without fail, the second rocket will hit yellow just because you can't get there fast enough. After that is the amount of empty space on certain maps. There's a lot of zones that absolutely nothing spawns in, and you never even visit that part of the map anyways. Something I left out of the good, which is because I'm sort of on the fence, is the Demented Echo. This red spirit has a chance to spawn in several different locations around the OZ, and while he isn't annoying, at times he can totally get the jump on you, and if you can't kill him in time before he reaches you, he summons tons and tons of zombies to your position, which can be a slog to clear out. And finally, a real non-issue, but in the November 3rd update that added Onslaught to Xbox and PC, the Ghosts at Treyarch added all the music tracks into the music player. But before that, getting the music from the music Easter egg was the largest pain in the ass because it wasn't duplicate protected. You could get a song like Generation like 6 times before you ever even saw Avogadro, which is the track that everybody wanted. And with that, we can wrap it up. So these are my thoughts on Outbreak. After over a decade of cranking out round-based maps, I think this was a fantastic direction to move in and was one of the best things that Cold War could have given us. I do really hope that this comes back in the future, with tweaks of course, obviously nothing is perfect. This is my second to last part in my Cold War review series, and I'll see you in May for the final part, my review of Onslaught as per my schedule for 2022. If you would like to watch the rest of my reviews of Cold War, I'll leave the link to the playlist in the description. As always, thank you for watching and have a great day.